I was cleaning out my late grandma's house. When I found a locked room, she never let anyone enter. What I discovered inside completely changed everything I thought I knew about her. I never thought stepping into grandma's house again would feel like walking into a memory I'd never been fully part of. The key turned in the rusty lock with a reluctant creak, as if the house itself had been holding its breath, waiting for me. The smell hit me immediately. Old wood, faint lavender, and a hint of something else I couldn't quite place, like forgotten afternoons folded between the pages of a diary. I had been here countless times as a kid, but now, walking through the front door alone, it felt different. Hollow, yet alive with echoes of her laughter. The house hadn't changed much. The same floral wallpaper in the hallway, a few framed photographs slightly askew on the walls, and the familiar creak of the floorboards under my feet. But it felt heavier now, weighty, like it was full of secrets that were waiting, just waiting for someone to notice. I set my bag down by the door and let myself breathe in the memories. Grandma had been, well, she had been Grandma. Warm, funny, and maybe a little strange at times. She had a way of knowing things without being told, and she could tell stories like nobody else. I smiled at the memory of her telling me, as a kid, that a squirrel had been spying on me from the oak tree outside my window. I had believed her completely. I started in the living room, dusting off stacks of books that had been left undisturbed for years. The shelves were crowded with curios, small figurines from places I didn't recognize, delicate glass animals, and a porcelain doll or two that gave me the shivers even now. I ran my fingers across a photo frame, paused. It was Grandma, in her younger days, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. He wasn't a family member I knew. I frowned. There was something almost deliberate in how the photo was placed, like she wanted someone to notice it eventually. I moved to the kitchen next, careful not to knock over the mismatched mugs she always insisted were her good ones, despite the chips on their edges. I opened drawers and cabinets, sifting through utensils and old spice jars, some still half full. A letter caught my eye, folded neatly, tucked behind the bread box. I hesitated, then opened it. The handwriting was hers, elegant, looping, but the contents were vague. Mentions of meeting someone, needing to be careful. Things she couldn't talk about. My heart picked up. I put the letter down, a knot forming in my stomach. Grandma had always been private. Yes, but this was something different. By mid-afternoon, I had made my way to the attic. The stairs groaned under my weight, and I shivered, partly from the chill, partly from the eerie quiet. Dust motes floated in the sunlight, streaming through the small window. I found old trunks and boxes, each one a little time capsule. A stack of photo albums made me pause. Flipping through them, I saw faces I remembered and some I didn't. Strange, candid shots, almost as if someone had been documenting moments without anyone realizing. I noticed a recurring symbol on a few of the photos, faintly etched in pencil, a mark I didn't recognize, but it unsettled me more than I could explain. I spent hours moving boxes and cleaning surfaces, and that's when I noticed it, the door in the basement. I had seen it 100 times before as a kid, tucked behind an old wardrobe and half hidden by shadows. It had always been locked, always. And Grandma's voice echoed in my memory. Never touch this room. Some things aren't meant to be seen. I swallowed hard. There was something about the door that felt alive, like it was daring me to come closer. I glanced around to make sure I was alone. I forced myself to move on for the moment, descending the narrow basement stairs to start on the lower level. Old furniture, covered in sheets, gave the space a ghostly feel. Stacks of boxes filled with knickknacks, letters, and what looked like her old journals cluttered the corners. I ran my fingers along the dusty surfaces, careful not to disturb anything too much. Then my eyes caught a glint beneath a stack of old books. I crouched and pulled out a small, ornate trinket box, its surface engraved with patterns that reminded me vaguely of the mark I had seen in the attic photos. Inside, nestled among some dried rose petals, was a key. My heart stopped. I held it in my hand, the metal cool and heavy, as if it carried the weight of the house itself. I looked up at the door. The urge to use it was almost unbearable. I could feel the pull of curiosity, of knowing, of uncovering something my grandma had fought so hard to keep hidden. I thought of the letters, the photos, the strange symbols, and the vague mentions of things she couldn't talk about. What had she been protecting? Why had she never let anyone near that room? Questions swirled in my head like leaves in a storm. And yet, despite every warning ringing in my ears, the temptation was too strong to ignore. I left the key on the basement floor for now, trying to convince myself that I should wait. After all, there were boxes to sort, memories to organize, things to remember about the grandmother I had loved. But even as I climbed the stairs back to the main floor, my mind kept drifting to the door. I couldn't stop thinking about what might be inside. And somewhere deep down, I knew that sooner or later I would find out. I settled into the living room, exhausted from the day's work, and pulled an old photo album onto my lap. I traced the edges of a picture of us baking cookies, her flour-dusted hands holding mine. She had always been careful with secrets, yes, but she had also always been careful to make me feel loved. I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining her smile, imagining her voice telling me a story. Then I opened them again and glanced toward the basement stairs. The key was still there, calling to me. And somehow, I knew I wasn't going to be able to ignore it for long. I barely slept that night. The key lay on the bedside table beside me, a cold weight that seemed to thrum with quiet insistence. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see that door in the basement, half hidden behind shadows, waiting. Grandma's voice echoed in my mind, soft but firm. Never touch this room. Some things aren't meant to be seen. And yet, the curiosity clawing at me was relentless, whispering that maybe, just maybe, the truths she had hidden were worth the risk. Morning light spilled into the room, pale and cautious, and I finally made a decision. I couldn't let the secret stay locked away any longer. My hands shook slightly as I grabbed the key, making my way down the creaking stairs to the basement. Each step felt heavier than last, as if the house itself was aware of what I was about to do. Standing before the door, I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. The lock was intricate, delicate looking, almost ornamental, but it clicked open with a satisfying turn. The door groaned as I pushed it, the sound echoing through the basement like a warning. Darkness swallowed the threshold, and a musty, faintly chemical smell hit me. Dust swirled in the air as I shone my flashlight inside, revealing a room frozen in time. It wasn't like any basement I had seen before. Shelves lined the walls, packed with journals, boxes, and photographs. There was an old desk in the center, its surface covered with more papers, stamps, and envelopes that hadn't felt air in decades. The air itself seemed heavy with secrecy, thick and intoxicating. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, careful not to disturb anything unnecessarily. The first thing I noticed was the journals, leather-bound, worn, with Grandma's elegant handwriting curling across the pages. I picked one up, dust motes rising like tiny ghosts. The entries were unlike anything I had ever read about her before. She wrote of people I didn't know, places I had never heard of, and tasks that sounded clandestine. There were notes about discreet meetings, cryptic instructions, and references to people identified only by initials. My breath caught. This wasn't just a private life, it was a hidden life, a life I had never imagined. I opened a box beside the desk and found letters tied with faded ribbons. The envelopes were addressed in her hand, but to names I didn't recognize. Some were foreign, others domestic, but all contained secrets, instructions, and subtle warnings. One letter mentioned a family matter that must remain protected at all costs. Another referenced a location, a date, and a cryptic phrase I couldn't make sense of. The key to the past will open the future. I shivered, realizing there was far more at play here than mere nostalgia. Photographs were next. I found a pile tucked behind the desk drawer. Faces stared back at me. People I had never seen, captured in moments that looked like clandestine meetings, travels, and events far from the life I had known my grandma living. Names and dates were scribbled in pencil on the corners, sometimes with a short note: trustworthy, keep safe, must not know the truth. Each photo deepened my sense that Grandma's life had been a labyrinth of secrets. As I continued exploring, I discovered objects that defied explanation. Old passports with multiple identities, a small locked safe hidden under the desk, and artifacts that seemed more than mere collectibles. An intricately carved box with symbols I couldn't identify. A set of keys of varying sizes, some looking decades old. I felt like I had stumbled into a museum of espionage, history, and mystery, all curated by someone I thought I knew completely. I paused, trying to absorb it all. My mind reeled with awe and confusion. Everything I had believed about my grandmother, everything I had cherished in my memories, now seemed incomplete. She had been protecting not only herself, but perhaps an entire network of secrets, some of which might still carry consequences today. Then I noticed it. A partially burned letter, the edges charred, almost destroyed. I carefully picked it up, careful not to lose the fragile fragments. It mentioned a major secret, a danger that spanned generations, and a hidden fortune, something that could change everything for the family. My hands trembled. This wasn't just hidden history. This was something that could reshape my life, and perhaps the lives of everyone connected to her. I spent hours in the room, sorting, reading, and trying to piece together what I could. My brain felt like it was on fire with questions. What had Grandma been involved in? Who were all these people? And most importantly, why had she gone to such lengths to keep it a secret? Eventually, I knew I needed to step back. To think, I carefully restored the journals, letters, and photographs to their original places. I locked the desk drawer, making sure the room appeared untouched. Yet even as I closed the door, a sense of exhilaration lingered alongside fear. I turned to leave, shining my flashlight across the basement one last time. And that's when I saw it. Movement outside small basement window. A shadow, blurred but unmistakable, watching me. My heart raced. I couldn't tell if it was a neighbor, a stranger, or someone connected to the secrets Grandma had left behind. I froze, trying to make sense of it, but when I blinked, the figure was gone. I stayed in the basement for a few more minutes, listening to the silence, every creak and groan of the old house suddenly magnified. When I finally climbed the stairs, I felt a thrill and a chill at the same time. The locked room had revealed itself to me, but the world outside seemed to know more than I did. Someone or something was aware that I had been inside. Back in the living room, I sank into the armchair, staring at the key I had returned to the trinket box earlier. It felt heavier now, more significant, almost as if it carried a warning. My mind raced, replaying every document, every photograph, every cryptic note I had seen. The house was no longer just a place of memories. It was a puzzle, a mystery, and perhaps a danger waiting to unfold. I couldn't stop thinking about the room. I couldn't stop thinking about the secret Grandma had spent a lifetime protecting. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that unlocking the next layer of her hidden life might change everything I thought I knew. Not just about her, but about my own family and maybe even myself. The next morning, I barely remembered sleeping. My mind kept replaying the room, the journals, the photographs, the burned letter. It was like stepping into a parallel life, one that had been tucked away behind Grandma's careful smiles and kitchen warmth. I knew I couldn't let it go. I needed to understand. I started by gathering all the journals and letters I had found. I spread them across the dining table, organizing them by date, handwriting style, and content. Names repeated, cryptic at first, but patterns began to emerge. There was a network, a web of people my grandma had been in contact with, stretching far beyond our small town. Dates matched photographs, letters hinted at clandestine meetings, and small notes in the margins suggested she had been mediating, hiding, or safeguarding information. It slowly became clear. My grandmother had not been just a gentle woman I remembered. She had been meticulous, courageous, and deeply involved in things she had never told anyone. Some intimate entries suggested she had been protecting people, family members, friends, perhaps even strangers, from danger. Other notes hinted at a hidden inheritance, something valuable enough to make people ruthless. In one journal entry, written in her precise script, stood out. If they knew the truth, lives would change forever. I cannot risk that. Not even for myself. The photographs offered more clues. Faces stared back at me. Strangers with smiles frozen in time, sometimes holding documents, sometimes standing near places I couldn't identify. Some had subtle markings in the corners, X's, circles, initials. One photo, particularly aged and faded, showed a young grandma standing in front of what looked like a safe house. A man beside her held a newspaper with a date scribbled on the edge, August 12th, 1978. My chest tightened. What had happened then? I started cross-referencing names and dates. One name kept recurring, Eleanor's Ridge. It appeared in letters, a few photographs, and an old map I found tucked in a journal. I pulled the map out, tracing the tiny village roads, the river, and a cluster of buildings marked with a small X. Notes in Grandma's handwriting suggested she had traveled there often, always in secrecy. Every time I thought I was getting close to understanding, a new puzzle piece emerged. It became clearer that she had been part of a covert network, a protector of secrets that went beyond family. Perhaps she had uncovered a local scandal or hidden a treasure meant for the family alone. Some entries mentioned danger, veiled threats, and cryptic instructions like, meet at dusk, trust only the circle, do not bring anyone unprepared. I could feel the weight of her sacrifices. She had kept me and the rest of the family safe, hiding painful truths and dangerous knowledge. I wondered how much of her life had been lived in fear for our safety. But then came the harder realization. These secrets weren't just about her. They could affect the living, including me. There were hints that someone else knew, or might still know, parts of her hidden world. A name repeated in a few letters, just initials, MR. The tone was wary, cautious, almost fearful. Whoever MR was, they had a stake in whatever Grandma had been protecting. My stomach sank. If this person or organization was still active, what could they want from me now? I debated what to do. Should I tell anyone in the family? My cousins, my aunt, even my parents? Or was this something I had to handle alone? The more I read, the more I realized that meddling might invite danger, yet keeping it all to myself felt impossible. The letters, photographs, and journals had a life of their own, demanding attention, demanding understanding. Hours passed in a blur. I barely noticed the sun shifting in the sky. Then, almost accidentally, my hand brushed against the corner of the desk. A small click echoed through the room. My heart jumped. I had discovered a hidden drawer, one I hadn't noticed before. Inside, there was a single envelope sealed and yellowed with age. My hands trembled as I held it. On the outside, a name I recognized, mine, was written in Grandma's flowing script. I froze. My name. Had she known I would come here? Had she left this for me specifically? I considered opening it, my fingers itching, but hesitated. Something about it felt sacred, almost dangerous. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it an explanation, a warning, or something else entirely? The weight of history pressed down on me, heavy and unyielding, and then I sensed movement, a presence. My head snapped toward the window. There, in the shadows of the overgrown garden, stood a figure. I couldn't see their face clearly, but they were unmistakably watching me. My breath caught in my throat. My pulse spiked. Who could it be? A nosy neighbor? A relative? Or someone connected to the secrets Grandma had spent her life protecting? I dropped slightly behind the desk, trying to make myself invisible while keeping an eye on the figure. Panic and adrenaline battled in my chest. Everything I'd uncovered, the journals, letters, photographs, the hidden drawer, suddenly felt even more precarious. The world outside the house had intruded into this private moment, and I had no idea whether this person was friend or foe. The envelope in the drawer called to me. It promised answers, revelations, perhaps even danger. My fingers itched to open it, but the presence outside made me hesitate. Whoever that was, they might know more than I did. My grandmother's warnings, my curiosity, my fear, they all collided in a single sharp thought. I wasn't prepared for this, not really. And then, before I could make another move, the figure turned slightly, disappearing into the shadows behind the trees. I could no longer see them, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling. I realized, with a sinking certainty, that the hidden truths of Grandma's life were not just her secrets anymore. They were mine too. I sank back into the chair, staring at the desk, at the drawer, at the envelope with my name on it. Everything I thought I knew about her and about my family was unraveling. The room felt smaller now, suffocating in its secrets, and outside, somewhere beyond the window, the world was watching, waiting. I knew then that opening the envelope would change everything, but so would leaving it closed. And before I could decide, the front door creaked. Someone was arriving. Updates. The front door hadn't even finished creaking when a voice called out, firm, urgent, yet familiar enough to make me pause mid-step. Are you the one going through Grandma's things? I froze, my gaze darting toward the living room. Standing in the doorway was a man in his late 40s, tall, with sharp eyes that seemed to look right through me. There was something unsettling about the calm certainty in his posture, as if he'd been expecting me. Yes, I stammered. Who are you? He stepped inside without waiting for an answer. My name is Adrian. I knew your grandmother. I knew her better than anyone you've ever met. His tone was flat, almost rehearsed, but the weight behind it made me shrink back. What do you want? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. To make sure you understand what you've stumbled into, he replied, glancing toward the basement door. That room, it's not just memories. It's a lifetime of secrets. And those secrets are dangerous. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to ask more, but the fear coiling in my stomach kept my mouth shut. Adrian's presence carried authority but also tension, like someone carrying the weight of battles long fought. Your grandmother, she was protecting something, he continued. Not just for herself, not just for your family, but for everyone who could be affected by it. Some of what she did, some of what she wrote, it wasn't entirely legal, but it was so it's necessary. Morally ambiguous, yes, but she did it to prevent worse outcomes. I swallowed hard, trying to process it all. Grandma? Morally ambiguous? My mind reeled. She had always been the sweet, gentle woman baking cookies and telling stories. Never someone who could have been involved in whatever Adrian was implying. I need to see it, I said finally, gesturing toward the basement. I need to understand for myself. He nodded slowly. I suspected you would. We descended the creaking stairs together. Adrian's eyes scanned the room like a hawk, noting details I hadn't noticed. The way the journals were stacked, the placement of letters, the small locked drawer I had discovered. Open it, he said, nodding toward the drawer with my name on the envelope. My hands trembled as I did. Inside, the envelope held more than I expected. There were letters, photographs, and a small packet tied with ribbon. I picked them up, heart racing. Adrian began to explain. Your grandmother was, well, she was extraordinary. She discovered a secret about your family that could have changed everything. There's a relative, someone you've never met, whose existence was hidden deliberately. She protected that person, and in doing so, she had to keep you all in the dark. What? Who? I whispered, a knot forming in my chest. That's the thing, he said. Even I don't know the full story, but she left clues, and those clues are dangerous if they fall into the wrong hands. I started sorting through the letters. One revealed that my grandmother had been safeguarding a trust, a hidden fortune, assets that had been carefully concealed for decades. Another letter described code instructions, a map, and names of people who had been involved in helping her. And yet another spoke of a moral choice she had made, one that involved deceiving someone for the greater good. The weight of it hit me all at once. This wasn't just history. This wasn't just a family secret. This was a living, breathing puzzle that someone, or many someones, still wanted. I looked at Adrian. Who else knows? He hesitated, his jaw tightening. That's the problem. Someone else knows. Someone dangerous. I've been tracking them for years. They've been looking for what your grandmother hid, and now that you found it, you've become a target. My mind went numb. The cozy, dusty house, the house of my childhood memories, suddenly felt like a trap. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow on the wall seemed sinister. I could feel eyes on me, even if no one was there yet. Adrian handed me one of the journals. Read this, he said. It'll help you understand what she was protecting and why it matters. But be careful. Every piece of information you uncover will lead you closer to danger. I sat at the dining table, the journal open in front of me. Page after page revealed more about my grandmother's secret life. She had acted as a guardian, mediator, and sometimes a decoy. She had outmaneuvered people who would have caused harm, hidden treasures and knowledge, and taken risks to protect her family and others. Some entries hinted at covert meetings in distant towns, coded messages, and even near escapes from threats she never disclosed. I felt a mix of awe and fear. Grandma, The woman who had baked cookies and told bedtime stories had been living in a world I couldn't have imagined. And now, it was my world. 2 hours passed. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the basement floor. Adrian had stepped back, letting me work, watching quietly as I tried to piece everything together. Then it happened. The sound of glass breaking in the kitchen above. My heart leapt into my throat. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "They're here," he said. "Someone has come looking. You need to move." We scrambled to gather the most important items: the letters, the journal, the small packet. Adrenaline surged as I stuffed them into a bag, realizing that this was no longer a quiet investigation. We were in danger. The first footsteps hit the basement stairs. I held my breath, heart pounding. Adrian gave me a sharp look. "Follow me," he whispered. We slipped out a side door leading to the garden, overgrown and shadowy, moving as quickly and quietly as we could. The world outside felt unreal. Twilight, tangled bushes, the distant sound of someone searching the house. I glanced back. Lights flickered inside, shadows moving like wraiths. Whoever they were organized, determined, and likely very dangerous. We ran down a narrow path toward the edge of the property. My chest burned and my legs ached, but fear gave me speed. My mind raced over everything I had discovered. The journals, the letters, the hidden drawer, the secrets Grandma had protected. Each revelation now carried a risk. Finally, we paused behind an old stone wall at the edge of the garden. My hands shook as I caught my breath. What now?" I asked. Adrian looked at me seriously. "Now you keep moving forward. You learn what she hid, you understand the stakes, and you protect yourself. The mystery isn't over. In fact, it's only just begun. Whoever came tonight knows enough to start hunting, and they won't stop." I swallowed hard, staring at the bag in my hands. Everything I had uncovered, the moral choices, the hidden family, the fortune, the covert actions, now demanded that I act. And I realized, with a sinking certainty, that I wasn't just discovering Grandma's secrets anymore. I was inheriting them, along with every danger they brought. As darkness settled over the property, I made a promise to myself. I would uncover the full truth. I would protect the legacy she had left behind, and I would face whatever or whoever was coming for it, because there was no turning back now. The morning after our escape from the house, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. Adrian had left out early, warned me to stay off the grid, to avoid predictable patterns. But sitting still wasn't an option. I had to unravel the web my grandmother had left behind. Her journals, letters, photographs, and that mysterious envelope weren't just curiosities anymore. They were pieces of a puzzle that someone else wanted just as badly as I did. I started by laying everything out on my small apartment table. Maps, letters, photographs, and journals sprawled like fragments of a forgotten world. I cross-referenced names and dates, noticing patterns I hadn't seen before. One name kept recurring: MR. The initials had appeared in the letters, scribbled on photos, even in a journal entry where Grandma wrote, "I cannot fail, MSR, cannot learn." I dug into public records, historical archives, and obscure online references. It felt like trying to piece together a puzzle with half the pieces deliberately missing. I tracked addresses, old businesses, and even brief mentions in news clippings. Slowly, a network emerged. People who had worked with or against my grandmother. Their lives intersected in ways I couldn't have imagined. Some were allies, some adversaries, and some morally gray figures whose loyalties were impossible to discern. But I wasn't working alone for long. I realized I needed help. I reluctantly called my cousin, Daniel. I hadn't been close to him, but I knew he was sharp and trustworthy, mostly. I explained the bare minimum, careful not to disclose too much over the phone. He agreed to meet me, curiosity mixed with concern in his voice. When he arrived, I could see the skepticism in his eyes. "You really expect me to believe Grandma led some secret life?" he asked, gesturing toward the stack of papers. "I don't know what to believe either," I admitted. "But I know there's something here and someone else wants it. I can feel it." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "All right, I'll help. But if this goes south, we stick together." With Daniel on board, the investigation gained momentum. We divided the work. He tracked people, dug through records, and handled surveillance details, while I deciphered codes, annotations, and cryptic instructions in Grandma's letters. Some codes were simple ciphers, others were much more complex, involving dates, locations, and even personal references that only Grandma could have known. Hours of labor began to pay off. It was during one of these late-night sessions that I discovered something alarming. A letter, written in the margins of a journal, referenced an incident I hadn't understood. A confrontation, long ago, involving someone who had been endangered because of Grandma's actions. She had protected a family, yes, but at the same time, her decisions had put others at risk. Morally, great choices, she had written, were sometimes necessary to protect the greater good. The revelation left me unsettled. Grandma wasn't the saintly figure I had thought. She had made mistakes, taken risks, and manipulated events to preserve certain outcomes. And yet, I couldn't help but admire her courage, her foresight, and her unwavering commitment to her family and the people she had sworn to protect. But danger wasn't just theoretical anymore. One evening, as Daniel and I pored over documents in the apartment, we heard a knock at the door. I froze. Adrian hadn't warned us about visitors. We exchanged a glance. "I'll check," Daniel whispered. He peeked through the peephole and froze. "Who is it?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "It's Miss," he said, his voice barely audible. "They know something, and they're not here to talk." My pulse spiked. Everything we had uncovered suddenly felt like a live wire, ready to explode. I grabbed the most important documents and stuffed them into a backpack. We slipped out the back door, hearts pounding, minds racing. Whoever MR was, they had tracked us here, and they were dangerous. We moved quickly, ducking through alleyways and side streets until we reached a safe house Adrian had recommended. Inside, we caught our breath and laid out everything we had uncovered. The clues led to a revelation I hadn't expected. A hidden compartment in one of Grandma's old desks, previously unnoticed, contained a ledger, a detailed record of transactions, coded communications, and personal notes. This was the core of her hidden life. It contained proof of a hidden fortune, connections to distant relatives, and hints of a conspiracy involving people who had tried to manipulate the family for decades. One entry in particular stopped me cold. It referenced a person, my grandmother's sibling, long thought, lost or erased from family history. The ledger implied that this sibling had been the origin point of some threats Grandma had faced. They had been protected, hidden, and perhaps even manipulated to survive. Daniel looked at me, eyes wide. So all this, it wasn't just about wealth or secrets. It was about saving people. Family, friends, even enemies. I nodded slowly, the weight of the realization pressing down on me. Grandma had been playing a long, dangerous game, and now I was in it. Before we could digest the information further, a sound outside made us freeze. Footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. Someone had found us. We grabbed the ledger, the letters, and the journal, preparing to move. A figure appeared in the doorway, a man in a tailored suit, cold and calculating. His eyes scanned the room, locking onto the ledger. "You found it," he said, voice smooth but dangerous. "I was hoping I wouldn't have to come here in person, but you've left me no choice." Daniel and I exchanged a tense glance. We barely had time to react. The man advanced, and I realized we were outnumbered, outmatched in strategy, and vulnerable. In a split-second decision, we bolted through a side exit, racing through the narrow streets toward another safe location Adrian had mentioned. Behind us, we could hear the distant sound of pursuit. My chest burned, adrenaline fueling every step. Finally, we reached a secluded area where we paused to catch our breath. I opened the ledger, scanning the entries for anything we hadn't noticed. And then it hit me. The core secret. A series of notes, photographs, and coded entries pieced together a narrative that explained everything. Grandma had been hiding not just wealth, but the truth about the family itself. Her sibling, her morally complex actions, and a network of people whose fates had intertwined with ours. Every mystery, every cryptic note, every photograph, all of it now made sense in a horrifying, exhilarating, and awe-inspiring way. But as I stared at the ledger, I knew one thing. The antagonist we had just narrowly escaped was now aware that we had uncovered part of the truth. They would pursue us relentlessly. And though the core secret was in our hands, the danger wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We had the answers we were seeking, but the world outside had changed. Shadows were closing in, and every decision from here on out would be high stakes, with consequences I could barely predict. We had been on the move for days. Daniel and I, tracing leads, decrypting notes, and constantly staying one step ahead of the people who were now clearly hunting us. Every alleyway, every abandoned warehouse, every quiet corner became a potential hideout. The ledger, journals, letters, and the envelope with my name were our map and our weapon. And now, finally, I felt ready to confront the truth, to uncover the final layer of Grandma's secret life. It began with the ledger. Spread out on the table of a safe house Adrian had prepared, I traced every name, every transaction, every cryptic note. Patterns formed like constellations in a sky of ink. There it was, the central thread that tied everything together. My grandmother had been hiding more than just wealth or documents. She had been safeguarding a person, a lost relative who had been erased from the family narrative. The ledger provided instructions on how to find them. A small town on the outskirts, a house marked in the old map she had left. Alongside it were instructions, warnings, and moral guidance. Protect at all costs. Do not involve those who are unprepared. The truth must come at the right time. I realized, with a mix of awe and dread, that I had been chosen to finish what she had started. To protect the hidden family member, to restore what had been lost, and to reconcile the fractured threads of history. Daniel leaned over my shoulder, eyes scanning the notes. This is huge. She trusted you with everything. I nodded, swallowing hard. I just hope I can live up to it. We set out at dawn. The journey was tense. Every car, every passerby, every unexpected noise made us flinch. But finally, we arrived at the house. A modest, weathered home that seemed ordinary at first glance. And yet, I could feel the weight of Grandma's planning in every detail. Inside, we were met by an elderly woman with sharp eyes. My grandmother's sibling, long thought while I'm lost. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same deep-set eyes, the same faint smile that hinted at secrets kept for decades. I froze for a moment, struck by the surrealness of the encounter. "I've been waiting," she said, voice steady but layered with emotion. "Your grandmother protected me all these years, even when it meant hiding me from my own family. I never imagined anyone would come for me." The reunion was emotional, almost surreal. I realized that the hidden inheritance, the coded letters, the journals, all of it had been designed to ensure this moment could happen safely. Grandma had orchestrated it all, leaving instructions, warnings, and tools to navigate a dangerous world. We spent hours going through the details. The ledger documented a hidden fortune, yes, but more importantly, it detailed the network Grandma had maintained. People she had protected, debts she had settled, threats she had neutralized. Some actions had been morally gray, even illegal in the strictest sense, but they had been necessary to preserve life and legacy. I could feel her reasoning, her courage, and her imperfections in every page. As the day turned to evening, we began to see the consequences of revealing these secrets. Long-lost connections were mended. Family members who had felt abandoned or betrayed slowly understood Grandma's intentions. Some relationships were strained. A cousin who had expected to inherit blindly was furious at the hidden fortune. But slowly, understanding grew. Then came the final confrontation. The antagonist, MR, the figure who had been hunting us from the shadows, appeared, demanding access to the ledger and the secrets it contained. They were dangerous, calculating, and willing to use force. But we were prepared. Adrian had arranged backup, and the network Grandma had left behind, former allies she'd once aided, stood with us. The confrontation was tense, a battle of wits more than weapons. Words were exchanged, threats made, and in the end, MR was neutralized. Not through violence, but by exposure. The truth was more powerful than fear. The network of evidence we had compiled, combined with testimony from people Grandma had helped, left MR with nowhere to hide. They retreated, defeated, and the immediate danger was gone. In the aftermath, I sat in the quiet of the house, surrounded by letters, photographs, and memories. I reflected on everything I had learned. Grandma had been extraordinary. Not perfect, but courageous, morally complex, and fiercely protective. She had left me a legacy that was both a gift and a burden, teaching me that family, trust, and sacrifice often exist in shades of gray rather than clear lines. I felt changed, wiser, stronger, more aware of the complexity of human choices. I had faced fear, navigated danger, and discovered truths that had been hidden for decades. And yet, I realized that some questions remained. The ledger hinted at other connections, other people whose lives were intertwined with Grandma's actions. Not everything was fully resolved, and I knew that danger, curiosity, and moral dilemmas might call again. But for now, there was peace. The hidden relative was safe. The inheritance and secrets were secure. And I had honored Grandma's legacy, not by erasing her imperfections, but by understanding them, by continuing her careful stewardship, and by carrying her lessons forward. I closed the ledger gently, taking a deep breath. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Shadows stretched long across the floor, but I felt ready to face whatever came next, armed with the truth, guided by the memory of the woman who had quietly shaped so much of our world from behind the scenes. And yet, even as I walked out into the evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, someone, or something was still watching. Grandma had left us many answers, but a few questions remained, teasing the edges of the future. Life would go on, secrets would continue to unfold, and I would be ready. Because some mysteries never truly end, they just wait for the next chapter.